Shouker decided to have a child with Zhang Yi, but Zhang Yi, due to the after effects of stimulants, was mostly unable to muster the strength. After all, he had injected himself with 3 doses at once, and now he just wanted to lie in bed and do nothing. Shouker said softly, "We're safe now. Anyway, I think having a baby would be nice." Zhang Yi, enjoying her fingertip massage while resting on her legs, replied, "The environment isn't very stable right now. If a new crisis arises, having a child would mean an extra burden." Zhang Yi gently comforted Shouker. "Don't think too much. Let's enjoy the present." Shouker pouted coquettishly. "I just want to have a token of our love." Shouker naturally had her concerns. With more and more young and beautiful women arriving at the shelter, she couldn't help but feel insecure, since most women tend to be wary of other women around their boyfriends, seeing them as potential rivals. This was why she thought about having a child to secure her position as the leading lady. At this point, Zhang Yi sat up. "Having a child is too troublesome. I have a simpler solution." Shouker blinked her big eyes curiously. "Is there another way?" Zhang Yi joked. "Practice your skills more and keep your figure in shape." Shouker blushed. "Are you joking with me? Where am I supposed to practice that? How can one practice such things alone?" The atmosphere was already set, and Zhang Yi was actually itching to act, but at the moment he truly was too weak to do anything. "Just you wait. Once I've recovered in a few days, I'll show you." Shouker was not to be outdone. "We'll see who's afraid then." As they were flirting, Uncle Yu happened to walk to the door, thinking to himself how playful young people are these days. Uncle Yu knocked on the door awkwardly and coughed. "Zhang Yi, Liang Yu is here looking for you. She says she has something to talk about." Among the 3, only Uncle Yu was not affected by the after effects of the stimulants. After all, his physical enhancement gave him a strong resistance to drugs. "Let her in. I just happen to have something to discuss with her too." Zhang Yi, a bit groggy, made his way to the living room. Yang Mi hurried over to help, but Zhang Yi waved her off. "I'm not that weak. Go get me a cup of hot water." Zhang Yi asked Liang Yu, who had just come in, to sit down. Noticing that Liang Yu was wearing clothes that didn't fit well, Zhang Yi curiously asked, "Why aren't you wearing the West Mountain Base combat uniform?" Not only does the combat uniform have strong bulletproof capabilities, but it also has impressive temperature regulation features, practically making one impervious to the cold and heat. Liang Yu responded somewhat helplessly. "The temperature control system requires electricity. Without West Mountain Base, we no longer have a source of electricity." Zhang Yi then realized not everyone was like him, with access to electricity at all times. Originally, when Liang Yu and her group arrived at Su Family Town, the villagers kept their distance from her, as the village was mostly left with the elderly, women, and children. Liang Yu took a vacant house with her dozen students, solving their housing issue, but they didn't know how to fish, so food supply was still a problem. Liang Yu couldn't possibly rob those simple villagers, so she had no choice but to seek help from Zhang Yi at the shelter. Zhang Yi leisurely sipped his coffee and asked, "Are you here for your students this time?" Liang Yu was somewhat embarrassed to speak up, but then she earnestly said, "Before the attack on West Mountain Base, we agreed that I would help you take West Mountain Base, and you would provide shelter and food for me and my students. Now that West Mountain Base has fallen, and the shelter is readily available in Su Family Town, I was hoping you could fulfill our agreement and provide us with some food." She sighed somewhat helplessly. "You should know, my students are the children of high-ranking officials and wealthy people. They're used to being pampered, and it might take some time to convince them to learn fishing." Hearing this, Zhang Yi sarcastically laughed. "It seems like the exercise at West Mountain Base wasn't enough. Didn't drink enough protein shakes?" Liang Yu, unable to rebut, changed the subject. "Regardless, you promised me before. Give us some food to tide us over for now. I won't bother you with this in the future." Zhang Yi nodded. "Don't worry, I'll keep my promise." Saying this, he immediately opened a dimensional door, and a mountain of food appeared in front of Liang Yu. "This is for you. It should be enough for you and your students for 2 weeks." Liang Yu was stunned, hastily putting down her cup. "Thank you, Zhang Yi. You deserve it." Zhang Yi thoughtfully gave her a large duffel bag, and Liang Yu hurriedly crouched down to start packing the food. Zhang Yi, watching her earnest demeanor, suddenly asked, "It must be tough for a woman to take care of so many students, right?" Liang Yu was taken aback. His words struck a chord. Since the apocalypse began, she had been diligently protecting her students, who gradually took her efforts for granted, never considering whether she found it hard. After all, she was just a woman in her 20s. Though she had been trained in martial arts from a young age and had a strong character, she sometimes needed comfort too. Tears welled up in Liang Yu's eyes as she looked up gratefully at Zhang Yi. "Thank you so much this time. I'll remember this favor. I had no choice. If I didn't take care of my students, they wouldn't stand a chance of surviving." Liang Yu stood up, lifting the food. "As their teacher, I just want to do my best to protect them. Otherwise, I couldn't forgive myself." Zhang Yi roughly understood Liang Yu's point. She was so diligently protecting these students not necessarily because she loved them so much, but because she was upholding her duty and responsibility as a teacher. Liang Yu is indeed worthy of respect. From this perspective, Zhang Yi suddenly thought if he could help Liang Yu effectively deal with this group of students, it might significantly reduce her psychological burden. Back at Azure Sky Academy, those guys had bullied Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, and Zhang Yi had not had a good impression of this group since then, thinking that their existence was a waste of resources and they might become a potential threat someday. He felt that he must find an opportunity to get rid of them. Zhang Yi said to Liang Yu with a smile, "They are all adults. How long do you plan to support them? They're like giant babies who haven't been weaned." Liang Yu also showed a face of helplessness. "I had hoped that they would gradually become mature, but reality has not changed." Zhang Yi looked at Liang Yu and suddenly said gently, "Seeing you work so hard is difficult for me to watch. Let me help you." Liang Yu looked incredulously at Zhang Yi. "What did you say?" Seeing her incredulous expression, Zhang Yi laughed. "I mean, I can provide food for you. You should know that I have a huge amount of resources, and supporting your dozen students is no pressure at all. Seeing you taking care of them like both a father and a mother is really hard to bear." Liang Yu was secretly delighted, but quickly became wary. She knew Zhang Yi's character and did not expect him to offer help without expecting something in return. She then tentatively asked, "Can I ask, in exchange for providing us with food, what do you want from us? We don't really have anything to give you." Zhang Yi suddenly stood up. "I definitely need you to provide a sufficient price in exchange for the food." Hearing this, Liang Yu relaxed her guard, thinking this sounded more like the Zhang Yi she knew. "What are your conditions?" "As long as it can save my students, I will agree to anything." Zhang Yi smiled meaningfully and then playfully pointed at Liang Yu with his finger. "I want you." Liang Yu was stunned at first, and then her cheeks flushed red, and she stood up indignantly. Don't go too far. I will absolutely not sell my body." Zhang Yi's lips curled into a mischievous smile. Then, he put on a puzzled face. "I was thinking of hiring you as my personal teacher, to teach me some martial arts and combat skills. What did you think I wanted you for?" He then teased. "You are a people's teacher, after all. What on earth were you thinking?" Liang Yu was dumbfounded by Zhang Yi's teasing, not knowing what to say. Then, naively thinking she had misunderstood Zhang Yi, she hurriedly apologized with guilt. "I'm sorry. I misunderstood your intention." At this point, Zhang Yi acted somewhat indignantly. "What kind of person do you take me for? Do you really think I, Zhang Yi, am that shallow?" Then, turning around and waving his hand, he said, "Since you're unwilling, I won't force you. After all, the life and death of those students have nothing to do with me." Seeing this, Liang Yu panicked. Teaching martial arts was her job, and with such a good opportunity in front of her, she certainly didn't want to miss it. I'm willing. Zhang Yi looked at her flustered and anxious expression, which contrasted strongly with her fierce combat ability, and he couldn't help but laugh inwardly, deciding then and there, "I've set my sights on this woman." Then he put on a serious face and said to Liang Yu, "Then from now on, you'll teach me for 2 hours every day, and I'll provide food for 10 people in return." Liang Yu was puzzled. She and her students totaled 16 people, and food for 10 would certainly not be enough for everyone. She then pleaded, "Could you give 6 more portions? You won't miss that little bit." Zhang Yi smiled faintly. "This is not a one-time offer, but 10 portions every day. Do you expect me to support those students of yours? Can't they learn to fish? Even at this time, they still prefer ease to hard work. I won't indulge them." Liang Yu, embarrassed, had no choice but to take the food and leave the shelter first. Zhang Yi, bored out of his mind, lay on the sofa, thinking he could finally rest properly. Then, Lu Karen pushing Yang Xinxin came out. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. "You're late. Your teacher Liang just left." Yang Xinxin replied with a light smile. "I came out after the teacher left, because I heard most of your conversation. If we had come out earlier, I was afraid it would affect your negotiation." Suddenly, Yang Xinxin asked, "Zhang Yi, are you trying to woo teacher Liang?" Zhang Yi, who was drinking coffee, almost choked and sprayed it out through his nose, then awkwardly said, "Why would you suddenly ask that?" "No way, Zhang Yi, you're too fickle. You already have 2 sisters, yet you're still eyeing our teacher." Lu Karen teased with a hint of jealousy. Zhang Yi tried to keep his expression calm, but his face gave him away. Honestly, Liang Yu's attractiveness was high, and her combination of straightforwardness, adorableness, and formidable strength made her a valuable asset to keep around. Then, Yang Xinxin seriously analyzed, "Teacher Liang is so powerful, but her mind is pitifully small. This strong contrast indeed makes most men powerless to resist." After hearing this, Zhang Yi felt like he had found a kindred spirit. People with high intelligence indeed maintain rationality when analyzing situations. Zhang Yi indeed wanted to make Liang Yu his own, but he wasn't interested in playing games of love. Thinking this, Zhang Yi candidly said to Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, "Since you've seen through me, I won't hide it. Liang Yu's combat effectiveness is very valuable to me, so I plan to recruit her as a member of our team. As for love and such, that's just a seasoning, not a necessity." This kind of rational, almost indifferent statement made Yang Xinxin sigh after hearing it. "This is indeed the man I know," Yang Xinxin said with a smile. "In that case, go ahead. We two know teacher Liang the best, and I know better than you how to get her to join our team." Zhang Yi certainly didn't want to force it and quickly interrupted Yang Xinxin. "Don't make it so complicated. My goal is to have her follow me willingly and loyally." Yang Xinxin nodded in agreement. The key now is to help her get rid of those troublesome burdens. On this matter, the two shared the same thought. Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen had always been bullied by them, and in their view, teacher Liang was entirely dragged down by these dead weights. Zhang Yi, however, shrugged his shoulders. "This idea is actually quite risky. It's not the right time to move against them now. I don't want to ruin my relationship with Liang Zhang Yi beyond repair. With her stubbornness, if she finds out I was behind her students' deaths, she would definitely come after me without a second thought. Yang Xinxin's eyes turned cold as she responded, there will be an opportunity. Zhang Yi laughed, just make sure your teacher doesn't find out. Let me know if you have any good plans. As she was about to leave, Yang Xinxin suddenly said, I have something important to tell you about West Mountain Base. We might have missed some crucial information. I've been going through West Mountain Base's information database these past few days and discovered quite a lot of interesting intel. Zhang Yi immediately sat up straight. What intel? Yang Xinxin gave a mysterious smile. It's a bit too much information. I'll tell you after I've sorted it out. For now, just a heads up to prepare you. But one thing's for sure, there are several organizations as powerful as West Mountain Base and Heavenly Sea City. Your counterattack made such a big noise, it's likely already attracted the attention of multiple forces. Hearing this, Zhang Yi became tense. Not being targeted again, am I? It hasn't even been quiet for a few days. Yet, Zhang Yi also calmly laughed. Heavenly Sea City is a megacity with over 20 million people. Even if only 5% survived, that's still over a million people. It's impossible for West Mountain Base to be the only organization. I just didn't expect to get noticed so soon. With our current strength, we actually don't fear other forces. Now that we have 5 and 8 mutants, if we count Liang Yu in advance, ordinary forces shouldn't easily become our enemies. Yang Xinxin nodded. Indeed, I'll go sort out all the information and then bring it to you. After saying this, Lu Karen prepared to leave, pushing Yang Xinxin. But Zhang Yi called out to her. Lu Karen, wait a moment. Zhang Yi told Lu Karen, after Chun Lei and Uncle Yu moved to Lark Manor, our defense line has extended. If we encounter an external invasion again, we will undoubtedly be in a passive position. So, I have an idea to build a defense line around our 3 villas, and I want you to design the blueprints for this defense project. However, Lu Karen looked troubled. Designing a blueprint is easy for me, but such a large defense project isn't something you can just decide to build. We only have a few people, not to mention we lack large machinery, and currently, materials are nowhere to be found, so this idea is virtually impossible. Zhang Yi earnestly counted on his fingers. I can have Uncle Yu move materials, Chun Lei can control ice and snow, and if we need to cut materials, we can call your teacher Liang Yu. Flower can also help with manual labor. I think it's not impossible. After some thought, Lu Karen admitted, you're right, although we're few, each of us has unique abilities. It does seem feasible. Zhang Yi nodded. Start designing. We'll figure out the materials and processes as we go. On the second day, Zhang Yi called Chun Lei and Uncle Yu to share his idea of building a defensive line. He planned to encircle their 3 villas with a sturdy defense so that they would not be as passive when facing powerful enemies in the future. Even if the outer defense was breached, they could retreat to the shelter for continued defense. The construction didn't need to be as solid as a shelter, which would still buy them significant time for defense. Uncle Yu and Chun Lei nodded in agreement after hearing the plan, as they were the ones who would benefit the most from it. Chun Lei, particularly excited, exclaimed, great minds think alike, boss. I've barely slept over the past 2 nights, always worrying about someone sneaking in and pointing a gun at my head. Uncle Yu, a veteran, also shared his thoughts. If we're building a defensive line, why not equip it with counterattack capabilities? If we could set up powerful firepower on the defensive line, wouldn't that be perfect? Chun Lei then asked, but how will we solve the issue of weapons and ammunition? Zhang Yi calmly responded, weapons are easy. I have plenty of ordinary firearms, and Lu Karen can help me manufacture bullets. What's important is to have heavy weapons with strong lethality. Let's wait until I fully recover from the side effects of the stimulant. Then, we can look inside the West Mountain Base, where the armory should still have plenty of treasures. Uncle Yu also suggested, the construction materials of the West Mountain Base are of high quality. We could dismantle some materials to reinforce the defensive line. However, Zhang Yi frowned and said, the West Mountain Base is constructed with monolithic casting, which is not practical to dismantle. This dilemma led Chun Lei to jokingly suggest, are we supposed to control the snow to build the defensive line? This comment sparked an idea in Zhang Yi. Snow won't work, but what about ice blocks? In this temperature, we don't need to worry about the ice melting. Thick ice blocks are almost as strong as concrete. We can add some steel bars as a framework, making repairs quite simple. With Chun Lei's ability to control ice and snow, building an ice wall as a defensive line should not be a difficult task. Shokir, holding a glass of water, laughed in confusion. Even West Mountain Base, such a powerful organization, was wiped out by you guys. Who in Heavenly Sea City would dare to provoke you easily? Zhang Yi seriously replied, better safe than sorry. We must take precautions and enhance our defenses as much as possible. But Chun Lei suddenly asked, Dr. Zhou is right. West Mountain Base should have been the strongest organization in Heavenly Sea City. Since even they have been eliminated by us, other forces probably don't even have the chance to hide from us. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. Indeed, West Mountain Base was taken down by us, but it happened overnight, and other forces are unaware of the entire process. In their eyes, we are just a few ordinary people who were lucky to survive. They probably don't take us seriously. Hearing this, Chun Lei had an epiphany. You make a good point, boss. Let's hurry up and build our defenses. The more you talk about it, the more scared I get. Zhang Yi didn't want to delay any longer. The sooner they could fortify their defenses, the more secure they would feel. Zhang Yi waved his arm. My body has mostly recovered now, so let's set out tomorrow and search West Mountain Base again. Zhang Yi's mindset had undergone a significant change, especially after absorbing Ling Feng. He felt a considerable boost in his strength, and the cautious attitude he had before no longer existed. Just then, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, showing Liang Yu's visit on the monitor. Chun Lei, stroking his chin teasingly, said, "No way, the boss isn't such a tomboy. You have quite the unique taste." Zhang Yi chuckled bitterly. "What do you know? My relationship with her is purely platonic. She's now my personal teacher." Uncle, you couldn't help but laugh. Talking about a platonic relationship when it's already a man-woman relationship, you young people really know how to play. At that moment, Chun Lei, imagining the scene of a personal teacher, said enviously, "The boss is really something. Respect." Zhang Yi paid no mind to their mischievous looks and welcomed Liang Yu into the living room. As she entered, Liang Yu felt a warm flow of air, a stark contrast to the bone-chilling wind outside. Seeing the women leisurely playing mahjong and the men sipping hot tea and chatting, she even felt as if this wasn't a part of the real world. Then, Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin came over, warmly greeting Liang Yu. They naturally held great respect for teacher Liang, who maintained her kindness and innocence in such an apocalyptic world, a rarity akin to a national treasure. Liang Yu, feeling gratified, said, "Seeing you two so comfortable makes me relieved." Yang Xinxin sweetly smiled. "We are indeed very happy living here with brother Zhang Yi." As she spoke, she held Liang Yu's hand with a look of pity. "Teacher Liang, with the outside environment being so harsh, why don't I ask brother Zhang Yi if you can move in and live with us?" Hearing this, Liang Yu indeed found it hard to refuse and was shaken. But then, thinking of the dozen students still in Su family town, she stood up and shook her head. "They can't be without me. Otherwise, they won't be able to survive in this harsh environment. At the very least, I need to teach them to adapt to this environment and learn basic survival skills." Yang Xinxin smiled in response. "Even if you move into the shelter, it doesn't conflict. They are all adults. They can still help themselves without your constant protection. Moreover, if you want them to learn how to be independent quickly, you have to force them to learn survival skills on their own, rather than relying entirely on you, teacher Liang." After hearing this, Liang Yu found it quite reasonable and was clearly tempted by what Yang Xinxin said. She then turned her face away somewhat awkwardly. "But I'm not close to Zhang Yi. He probably won't agree to let me move in, right?" She then shyly whispered to Yang Xinxin, "If Zhang Yi really agrees to let me stay in the shelter, what about Wu Qingyu and the others?" Yang Xinxin reassured her, "Don't worry, Lu Karen and I will plead on your behalf. As for the other students, it's impossible for Zhang Yi to let them move in. This means that regardless of where you live, their situation won't change, and they have no reason to stop you from moving in. Even if you do, you can still help them." Seeing the teacher's conflicted expression, Yang Xinxin knew there was a chance. Just one day living in the shelter, and she was confident she could convince her to stay. After all, once experiencing such a comfortable environment, it would be hard to want to return to the cold outside. And if teacher Liang moved in, the students would naturally lose their protection, providing an opportunity to resolve them altogether. Yang Xinxin had already made a plan, but now that the timing was just right, pushing further might backfire. She then blinked innocently and smiled. "But these are all up to you, teacher Liang. If you decide, just let me and Lu Karen know." At that moment, Zhang Yi came over. "Liang Yu, come with me. It's a bit crowded here." Soon, they arrived at the training area on the third underground floor. Zhang Yi, noticing Liang Yu's dirty and torn clothes, immediately took out a set of sportswear from another space. "There's a bathroom over there. Go take a shower and change your clothes first." Liang Yu's face turned red with embarrassment. Although she was a powerful master of martial arts, she was also a woman in her 20s. Zhang Yi's gesture was obviously a reminder of her uncleanliness, and she could only explain softly, "I can't help it with the current environment." She then walked into the bathroom with the clothes. Half an hour later, she came out of the shower. The clothes Zhang Yi chose were perfect, comfortable for sports, and flattering to her figure. Liang Yu's robust yet delicate lines were complemented by a hint of valiant grace. Zhang Yi swallowed and nodded in satisfaction. "Let's begin." Liang Yu quickly got into role, adopting a stance and saying, "Learning martial arts is not as simple as you think. I'm very strict. Since you've chosen me to teach you, you'd better be prepared." Liang Yu was very committed to teaching, especially since Zhang Yi had provided such valuable resources. She wanted to repay him in this way. Fortunately, Zhang Yi had always kept up with his exercises and could barely keep up with Liang Yu's pace. However, after 2.5 hours of training, Zhang Yi was completely exhausted and collapsed to the ground. Liang Yu wiped the sweat from her brow and said to Zhang Yi, "Your foundation is not bad, but don't expect to become a master overnight. It's a long process, and you need to be mentally prepared." Zhang Yi, panting, responded, "I don't aim to become some martial arts master. I just want to learn some self-defense skills." Then, Liang Yu couldn't help asking, "You defeated a master like Ling Feng. Who else could possibly threaten you?" Zhang Yi smiled slightly. "No one knows what tomorrow or accidents may bring. All we can do is prepare as thoroughly as possible." Zhang Yi, supporting himself up, said, "Let's call it a day for today. I'm totally spent. He then took out a large bag of food from another space. This should be enough to feed 10 of you. He then left the training area. Holding the food, Liang Yu fell into deep thought, recalling Yang Xinxin's suggestion. If these words had come from Zhang Yi, she would have been wary of some trick, but Yang Xinxin was just a naive little girl with paralyzed legs, unlikely to have any ulterior motives. She asked herself, can I really move in here? On her way out of the shelter, Liang Yu pondered over Yang Xinxin's words. Thinking about the superior living conditions in the shelter, it was hard not to be tempted. Actually, upon reflection, we indeed need to get closer to Zhang Yi, so he can help us more. The more Liang Yu thought about it, the more it made sense. Upon her return to Su family town, the students crowded around her. They didn't care whether the training was hard for Liang Yu or if she was cold on the way, only scrambling for the food. Seeing their behavior, Liang Yu sighed in disappointment and asked Yi Xiaotian and Wu Qingyu, when I left, I asked you to organize the students to learn fishing. Did you make any progress? Yi Xiaotian, having been enhanced by West Mountain Base and being the strongest among the students, and Wu Qingyu, the class monitor known for his cleverness, were tasked by Liang Yu to help manage the students. Wu Qingyu, munching on a piece of bread, responded dejectedly, it's not that we didn't want to go, but the daily cycling at West Mountain Base was hard enough. We walked all the way here, and now, finally having a chance to rest, it's really difficult to work in the cold wind. Yi Xiaotian also frowned slightly. I did try to chisel some ice to catch a few fish, but our tools are too primitive, and the efficiency is too low. Liang Yu looked at the few pitiful crucian carps on the ground and sighed in disappointment. She had indeed underestimated the difficulty of fishing. The villagers of Su family town also relied on sled dogs to succeed. These students, lacking experience and proper tools, found it virtually impossible to rely on fishing as a source of livelihood. However, with only 10 portions of food brought back by Liang Yu for 15 people, they were far from satisfied. After eating, the students started to complain, why is there so little? We're not even full. In this cold weather, it's easy to get sick if we don't eat enough. Seeing this, Yi Xiaotian stood up. Let's all try to bear with it for now. If it weren't for Teacher Liang's hard work in getting us this food, we'd still be hungry. We need to think of ways to solve our food problem ourselves. The students looked at each other, their faces filled with reluctance. Breaking ice to fish in this weather was too hard, and now, not getting enough to eat made it even harder to muster the energy. Wu Qingyu suddenly spoke up. Teacher Liang, since you're going to the shelter every day to teach Zhang Yi martial arts, could you please ask if we can also move in? Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen have moved in, and we're all from the same class. It shouldn't be too much to ask for us to move in too. Hearing Wu Qingyu's suggestion, the other students became excited. Yeah, that shelter is super big. Adding a dozen of us shouldn't be a problem. If Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen can live there, why can't we? These students were children of influential people in Heavenly Sea City, and in their eyes, Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen were nobodies. Liang Yu explained with a speechless face, how can you compare yourselves to them? Zhang Yi's girlfriend is Yang Xinxin's sister, and Lu Karen is Yang Xinxin's best friend. Besides, both of them have very strong professional skills. What do you have to compare with them? Apart from your now useless social connections, the students still showed reluctance. They understood the logic, but were simply unwilling to accept it. The students continued to plead with Liang Yu, Teacher Liang, please try harder. You're our teacher, you must have a way. Liang Yu's heart softened. In this situation, leaving everyone behind to go to the shelter alone, how could I possibly suggest that? After Liang Yu left, Chun Lei sneakily came over to ask Zhang Yi, what did you guys do for those 2.5 hours? Zhang Yi, exasperated, replied, what rubbish are you thinking about? Get ready. We're heading to West Mountain Base tomorrow to search for supplies. Chun Lei then said with a peculiar expression, should we invite Liang Yu to come along? We can't be sure if there are any survivors inside the base. Having one more person could provide additional security. Uncle Yu couldn't resist teasing, Chun Lei, you're being too timid. How are you going to survive in this apocalypse with that attitude? Chun Lei chuckled, isn't that what the boss taught us? Better safe than sorry. Zhang Yi smiled. Chun Lei's concern isn't without merit, but it's not appropriate to ask her now. Our relationship with her is purely professional. She's not one of us yet. We going will be enough. There shouldn't be any danger. The next day, the trio was fully armed and ready to depart. Lu Karen's design scheme had also reached its final version. All that was needed was for Zhang Yi to bring back construction materials, and they could immediately start building the defenses. As they set off to West Mountain Base, Zhang Yi activated the auto drive and started petting Flower. Chun Lei suddenly mentioned, ever since the last battle at West Mountain, I've felt like Flower has changed. Zhang Yi looked down at Flower, who was quietly dozing off on his lap. What's different? Wasn't it just an ordinary calico cat before its transformation? Chun Lei couldn't specify. It was just his sensitive intuition that noticed the subtle change. Zhang Yi thought to himself, last time Flower absorbed the powers of several mutants, there definitely were changes, but the specifics and the principles behind them were still unknown. However, it was certain that Flower possessed the ability to absorb other mutants' powers, similar to him and Ling Feng. After consuming several mutants and modified humans in one go, its power had surely increased significantly, but the extent of this enhancement could only be understood through actual combat, as he couldn't communicate with a cat. Yang Xinxin then called Zhang Yi. Brother Zhang Yi, have you arrived at West Mountain Base yet? Zhang Yi was driving slowly and was only halfway there. Yang Xinxin urgently said, I've just discovered some significant information while going through the intelligence. Hearing this, Zhang Yi promptly stopped the car to listen. Go ahead. I've just clarified the information about other large armed forces in Heavenly Sea City. Currently, there are 4 large military-style shelters: West Mountain, Emerald Waterside, Radiant Prosperity, and Morning Dew. These were high-standard shelters built to withstand nuclear strikes and major natural disasters. All 4 bases are equipped with huge arsenals and ample war supplies. Zhang Yi nodded. These aren't secrets. They've been reported in the news before, and there were even leaks of the shelter's interiors online. According to Yang Xinxin, there are at least 3 other large armed forces in Heavenly Sea City, though they are far from his shelter and might not have noticed them yet. However, the commotion at West Mountain Base that night was too loud, definitely attracting their attention. If they learn that West Mountain Base has been destroyed, they will surely extend their reach here, potentially leading to direct conflict with Zhang Yi. Yang Xinxin added, it's not just those 3 forces. There's a very special force in Heavenly Sea City, gathered in areas like Celestial Tribute and Eternal Mist, harboring a large population. But for now, there's almost no record of them beyond their vast numbers. Zhang Yi nodded in approval. With Heavenly Sea City's past population of over 20 million, having multiple forces isn't surprising. Yang Xinxin, you've done well. Your intelligence is very useful. Receiving praise, Yang Xinxin blushed with happiness and smiled. I'll continue to work hard on gathering intelligence, and I'll report it to you in detail when you return. Brother, Chunlei looked worried. There are so many forces in Heavenly Sea City, and each one as powerful as West Mountain. It would be troublesome if they set their sights on us. Zhang Yi remained calm. It's not surprising that Heavenly Sea City has these forces given its large population, but fortunately, the city is big enough. As long as we don't provoke them, they shouldn't easily notice us. Now, with only about 10% of the city's population remaining, the resources left should be more than enough for the major forces to share. Until resources become scarce, everyone should be able to coexist peacefully, since everyone values their lives too much to risk unnecessary conflicts. Uncle Yu, who had been quiet, then said thoughtfully, I have a feeling things won't go as smoothly as we think. My gut tells me we'll be encountering them soon. Zhang Yi confidently stated, we can't predict the future, but one thing is for sure, as long as we are strong enough, no one will dare to provoke us easily. The entrance of West Mountain Base. 2 groups of people were standing at the entrance of the base, both sides wary of each other. The leader in combat gear said, the entrance has been completely blocked. It's pointless to stay here any longer. The red-haired youth smiled lightly. Seems like we can't gain anything from here. Who would have thought West Mountain Base would be destroyed by missiles? What did Chen Xinyan do to offend the River South domain? It's his own fault. The leader in combat gear scoffed. Chen Xinyan was always arrogant. It's not surprising he met this end. The red-haired youth didn't continue the topic, just sighed about the wasted trip. The noise that night was too loud. They were just here to see what had happened. The leader in combat gear frowned deeply, looking at the ruins of the base entrance, knowing it wouldn't be easy to salvage useful materials. Their main base, Morning Dew, was too far to bring additional manpower quickly. However, he was aware that West Mountain Base was a valuable prize. If they could clear the entrance, the resources and weapons inside would significantly enhance their strength. The red-haired youth, seeing his thoughts, smirked. Even if you could use mutant powers to clear the entrance, it would be difficult for you to transport the materials back to your harbor base at Morning Dew, right? With Heavenly Sea City in between and a distance of over 200 kilometers, it won't be easy. The leader of Morning Dew retorted, if we can't do it, you certainly can't either. Why waste your time here? The red-haired man replied, we're just here to check the situation, presumably because of the noise that night. Now that we've confirmed they're all gone, it's actually good news for us. He continued, looking at the ruins. You see, Radiant Prosperity and Emerald Waterside didn't waste their time coming here. Seems they're wiser than you. But then he suddenly thought, maybe not. They're so close, they might have already been here. What a pity for you guys at Morning Dew, so far away. This destruction of West Mountain Base doesn't seem to benefit you much, and it's likely Emerald Waterside and Radiant Prosperity who'll end up gaining from it. Once they divide West Mountain Base's territory, their strength will surely increase. Then, Morning Dew will really be in danger. They were well aware that West Mountain Base had the strongest arsenal among the 4 major bases. The Morning Dew leader coldly remarked, are you trying to stir up trouble? Are all of you from Snow Worship Sect as shameless? The red-haired member of Snow Worship Sect scoffed dismissively. The 4 bases have never been on good terms. Do you really need me to stir things up? Meanwhile, Zhang Yi and his group arrived near West Mountain Base. Their goal was to empty out the arsenal of West Mountain Base. To avoid drawing attention, Zhang Yi decided to park the car a kilometer away and approach on foot. Indeed, as they approached the entrance, Zhang Yi saw 2 groups standing off against each other. One group wore standard tactical gear, likely from another shelter. The other group's attire was more varied, probably the kind of grassroots force Yang Xinxin had mentioned. Zhang Yi didn't want to engage with either group, as there was no need to compete with them for resources. resources, planning to approach them. Wearing West Mountain Base's tactical gear should prevent them from being immediately perceived as enemies, instructing Uncle Yu and Chun-Lei to hold back. Their West Mountain Base insignias were recognized by the Morning Dew group upon noticing them. The leader from Morning Dew remarked in surprise, "There are still people alive from West Mountain Base. I thought everyone there was gone." Seizing the moment, Zhang Yi said, "The West Mountain Base encountered some trouble. Are you planning to take advantage of our misfortune?" The red-haired member from Snow Worship Sect hurriedly waved his hands. "Brother, don't get it wrong. We're just passing by. We at Snow Worship Sect always prefer peace and don't wish to be enemies with anyone." After saying this, he smiled and left the base. He was only looking to scavenge, but, seeing no easy pickings, decided to beat a quick retreat. No one would likely enter West Mountain Base's interior soon, and starting a conflict now would be more trouble than it's worth. Watching the ruins of West Mountain Base, the leader of Morning Dew couldn't help but laugh. "Looks like West Mountain Base has been wiped out, and you few are just remnants. What are you pretending for?" With the situation openly acknowledged, Zhang Yi spread his hands and said, "Since you all know, there's nothing more for me to say. Please, feel free." After finishing, Zhang Yi told Chun-Lei and Uncle Yu, "Let's pull out." He knew they couldn't enter the base for now. It was better to wait for the others to leave. Avoiding conflict when unnecessary was the plan, as they had plenty of time. Suddenly, the Morning Dew leader shouted, "Stop right there. Who said you could leave?" Initially ready to leave, Zhang Yi and his group narrowed their eyes at the arrogant tone. Even Flower showed a hint of displeasure. Turning back, Zhang Yi looked at the young man as if he were foolish. "We avoid trouble, but don't fear it. You'd better recognize who you're dealing with." However, Zhang Yi's forbearance only emboldened them, mistaking them for mere survivors. "Haven't you realized the situation? Killing you would be as easy as flipping my hand. You'll do as I say." He then activated his power, his palm igniting with flames. Chun-Lei frowned. "A mutant?" The Morning Dew leader confirmed coldly, "Yes, I am a mutant. Killing you would be as easy as stepping on an ant." He believed Zhang Yi's group, having survived so long, must have hoarded valuable resources. "Hand over your supplies, and I might spare you." Zhang Yi shook his head, tired of pretending to be just a regular survivor. "I thought we could coexist, but your hostility leaves us no choice." Immediately activating his power, the Morning Dew leader was decapitated before even realizing what happened, his head dropping to the ground with a thud. Everyone was shocked. Before they could react, Flower transformed and attacked, biting them. However, Flower quickly spat them out, indicating they were not mutants. Absorbing the leader's power, Zhang Yi found it disappointingly weak. Chun-Lei commented on the folly of youth, believing power made them invincible. He got what he deserved. Zhang Yi observed, "This shows Morning Dew Base likely hasn't faced serious conflict, allowing such fools to think they're invincible." He stored the bodies in another space and headed towards the base entrance. Zhang Yi cleared the blocked entry by storing the obstruction in another space. Leading with Flower, they proceeded inside with miner's lamps, following Yang Xinshin's blueprints towards the arsenal. The way was littered with the bodies of Special Forces soldiers, most having died from asphyxiation, alongside the destroyed ventilation system, filling the air with the stench of decay. The source seemed to be the door to the fourth life support chamber. Chun-Lei, feeling uneasy, suggested, "Boss, there's a chilling air coming from behind this door. Could there be something foul? Let's just leave." Zhang Yi chuckled. "What's there to fear from the supernatural? Humans are far scarier. Even if there's something, it can't harm me." Soon after, the trio turned towards the arsenal, but shortly after their departure, a loud crash came from the door of the fourth life capsule, as if something was trying to burst out. Unnoticed by Zhang Yi and his group, they quickly found the arsenal. Its door was ajar, likely left by soldiers in a panic, attempting to arm themselves for an escape route, a plan that evidently failed. Pushing the door open, the sight that greeted them made their eyes widen in astonishment. They were stunned by the sight of an armed helicopter in the center of the warehouse, which sprawled over thousands of square meters and housed dozens of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, countless ammunition boxes, and various modern combat equipment. Uncle Yu, examining a Gatling gun, remarked, "This amount of equipment could arm an entire modern brigade." As a veteran, he had a good understanding of military hardware. Zhang Yi snapped back to reality. Many of these weapons must be from other garrison troops, transported here for consolidation. As they began storing the equipment in the alternate space, Chun-Lei expressed concern. "Powerful as they are, these weapons aren't much use in the current icy conditions, almost as good as scrap metal." Zhang Yi replied with a smile, "If these were of any use, Ling Feng would have utilized them during his attack on my shelter. Their uselessness to them doesn't mean they are useless to me. I need to build defenses, and these can be placed along the lines as defensive weapons. Transportation is the biggest challenge with these weapons, but that's no issue for me." Uncle Yu, still playing with the Gatling gun, said, "Zhang Yi, set me up with a few of these. I like them." Zhang Yi responded, "They're not intended for individual use, usually requiring several soldiers to operate. Perfect for someone like Uncle Yu with enhanced physical abilities. Pick whatever you like. Everything can go into my alternate space. Just let me know what you need." After clearing out the arsenal, they decided to explore the second life capsule for anything else of value. Upon reaching the entrance, they found it devastated, the epicenter of an explosion, yet yet fortunately not completely collapsed. Uncle Yu cleared the path with a shout, lifting a massive pillar, allowing them to proceed. The tragic scene ahead left them speechless. Chun-Li lamented the loss of such high-end equipment. What a waste. These are all premium goods. Zhang Yi was indifferent to the unusable equipment, considering it scrap, but speculated the data within the devices might aid Yang Xinxin's intelligence gathering, especially the computers potentially holding crucial information. Without much concern for their utility, he decided to take everything, his alternate space virtually limitless. Even if it turned out to be junk, it could still be used as projectiles later. Suddenly, Chun-Li screamed, falling to the ground, then pointed ahead pale-faced. There's something moving there. Could it be something filthy? He mustered the courage to throw a stone, prompting a swarm of black creatures to crawl out from the cracks. Zhang Yi also felt his scalp tingle, wondering if these were the cockroaches Liang Yu mentioned, used for protein extraction. He wasn't scared, just disgusted. Seeing Chun-Li's reaction to the cockroaches, Zhang Yi teased, "You're right, these cockroaches have high protein content. Tasty, I bet. Come on, man, you're acting like a scared woman over a few bugs." Chun-Li awkwardly tried to act calm. "How could I be scared by a few cockroaches? It was just the rustling sound that startled me." After collecting all the equipment, Zhang Yi planned to check elsewhere. As they were leaving, Chun-Li was still shaken, muttering, "The vitality of these cockroaches is so strong. If they ever mutate, they'd be tough to deal with." Hearing this, Zhang Yi felt a chill inside, thinking that if cats could mutate, cockroaches mutating was entirely possible. While walking through the corridors, Flower suddenly screeched and roared into the darkness, its fur bristling. But by the time Zhang Yi and the others turned around, the sensation of being watched vanished. Zhang Yi then felt, deep within West Mountain Base's corpse-littered underground, something eerie might have emerged. He felt as if something was lurking in the shadows, watching them. Zhang Yi urged, "Let's quickly see if there's anything else useful. We shouldn't stay here long." If not for Flower's keen senses, they might have already left. They soon found the storage warehouse, but its door was tightly shut. Without hesitation, Uncle Yu punched it, creating a massive sound that echoed through the underground space. Despite the force, the door barely budged, showing only a shallow dent from his punch. Zhang Yi chuckled. This is the main storage for supplies. It would be embarrassing if it could be opened with a single punch, but he took it as a good sign, indicating the contents were likely intact. Pulling out a high-temperature cutting torch from the alternate space, Zhang Yi was eager to see what treasures lay inside. Handed the torch to Uncle Yu, signaling it was his turn. Chun-Li commented dryly, "From your stance, I thought you were going to do it yourself." Zhang Yi laughed. "I wouldn't know how to use this thing." "Uncle Yu, you used to be our community security guard. You're familiar with these tools." Taking the torch, Uncle Yu grinned. "Step back and watch." He cut a man-sized hole in the door and kicked it open. Inside, they were astounded by the sight of shelves stacked with supplies reaching nearly 10 meters high. Uncle Yu, spotting something under a gray cloth, speculated, "What's hidden under that gray cloth? Could it be treasure?" Peering closer, Zhang Yi saw steel bars peeking out from under the cloth, revealing construction materials upon uncovering. His eyes lit up, realizing these were exactly what he needed for his defense line construction. A serendipitous find. Together, they uncovered the massive gray cloth, revealing a small mountain of reinforced concrete prefabricated boards, all military-grade, perfect for building defenses. Without a word, Zhang Yi, delighted, immediately started storing all the materials in his alternate space, thrilled by the find. Upon discovering a hidden door, Zhang Yi found it led to a room full of fresh vegetables, likely requisitioned from Su family town. There were dozens of such rooms, which held little interest for Zhang Yi, but he decided to take the produce anyway. "I don't need these at home, so I'll split them between you two," Uncle Yu modestly responded, acknowledging Zhang Yi's pivotal role in overcoming West Mountain Base, and insisted that Zhang Yi should claim the largest share. "These are too much for me alone. I'd take years to consume them. Better you keep them, and we can ask if we need anything." Zhang Yi seized the opportunity to foster camaraderie. "I've always considered you guys my brothers. I wouldn't forget you when it comes to sharing good stuff. It's more convenient to store the supplies with me for now." Touched, they nodded in agreement, while Flower indifferently groomed itself, seemingly inquiring about cat food or dried fish. After emptying the warehouse, they swiftly returned to the surface. Before leaving, Zhang Yi secured the entrance with rubble, then asked Chun-Li to reinforce it further. Using his abilities, Chun-Li covered the entrance with a thick layer of snow. Satisfied, Zhang Yi took out a snow vehicle, ready to leave before any reinforcements from Morning Dew could arrive, ensuring no trace of their visit remained. While they scavenged West Mountain Base, Liang Yu arrived at the shelter as usual to teach Zhang Yi martial arts, primarily to collect food for the day. Liang Yu was informed by Shokir that they were out on an errand and would return late. "He didn't inform me in advance. Perhaps we should skip today's session." Shokir's gentle tone left Liang Yu with no room for objection. She reflected on the situation. Missing a day's training mattered little to Zhang Yi, but meant hunger for her students. Struggling with the decision, as the 10 portions had always been insufficient, this only worsened their plight. Shokir, sensing an opportunity, warmly invited, "Haven't you eaten yet, Teacher Liang? It's mealtime. Why not join us?" Tempted by the thought of Zhang Yi's household's warm meals, Liang Yu hesitated but ultimately reluctantly declined, unable to enjoy a meal knowing her students were hungry. "I'll come back tomorrow." Shokir, with an apologetic tone, said, "I'm sorry, Teacher Liang, for making you come here for nothing." Liang Yu responded awkwardly, "It's okay, he must have more important things to attend to. Missing one day of training isn't a big deal. As a home tutor, I should adapt to his schedule, not the other way around." After saying this, Liang Yu quickly left the shelter. Watching Liang Yu's somewhat comical departure, Shokir couldn't help but comment with a smile, "Teacher Liang is really adorable." Yang Xinxin, arriving in the living room in her wheelchair, remarked, "Perhaps that's the stubbornness of a martial artist." Shokir sighed, "If she's too shy to eat with us, I could have packed some food for her." She knew Zhang Yi valued Liang Yu highly and might eventually invite her to join their team, so she was naturally very polite to Liang Yu. Yang Xinxin rolled her eyes. Packing food for her might have caused more trouble. Confused, Shokir asked, "What do you mean?" Yang Xinxin became serious. "My classmates are all selfish. If Teacher Liang really brought back only one portion of food, given her character, she wouldn't eat it alone. That would be the end of it. With over a dozen of them, fighting over that one portion would be inevitable. Expecting them to share peacefully is impossible. Teacher Liang surely knows this, which is why she declined. She's already stressed from caring for her students. There's no need to add to her troubles." Looking at Liang Yu's figure disappearing into the snow, Shokir wondered, why didn't Zhang Yi tell us in advance, or ask Teacher Liang not to come? Did he do this on purpose? Yang Xinxin rolled her eyes again. Of course, everything is within brother Zhang Yi's plan. Realization dawned on Shokir. Is he using this to exacerbate the conflict between the teacher and her students, putting pressure on Liang Yu to join us sooner? Yang Xinxin nodded. Definitely. Brother Zhang Yi is so capable. He must have considered this. Continuing dreamily, back at Azure Sky Academy, Flower and I used to run circles around our classmates. Brother Zhang Yi's tactic is somewhat similar to mine. He's just too strong. Shokir, reflecting, added, "This is typical of Zhang Yi. He always covers all bases, acts decisively, and every action is deeply meaningful." Their admiration for Zhang Yi was evident. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi was driving back, suddenly slapping his forehead. "I think I forgot to tell Liang Yu I was busy today." Having made a futile trip to the shelter, Liang Yu dejectedly headed back to Su Family Town. Passing by Heron's River, she saw women and children struggling to fish through the ice. With the town's men taken to West Mountain Base, the village was left with mostly the elderly, women, and children, forced to do tasks traditionally done by men to survive. This made her think of her own students, strong and able-bodied, yet unwilling to strive for survival like these women and children, realizing she had been too indulgent with them. Zhang Yi is right, Liang Yu thought, feeling her stomach rumble with hunger, resolving, "I'll confront the students today. We can't go on like this. They need to step out of their comfort zone." Upon arriving at the students' residence, they quickly surrounded her, becoming anxious upon seeing her empty-handed. "Where's the food? Why have you come back empty-handed?" Liang Yu, with a sense of resignation, explained, "Zhang Yi was out on urgent business, so there's no food today. Prepare to go ice fishing." The students were uproarious. "Why didn't he inform us in advance? Can't someone else from his house give you the food? Zhang Yi has plenty." Zhang Yi really broke his promise this time. Liang Yu felt displeased. "How can you speak of Zhang Yi like that? Without him, many of us wouldn't have survived West Mountain Base. Our arrangement with him is just a transaction. He owes us nothing. We can't depend on him forever. We must learn to fend for ourselves." Trying to reason with them about the necessity of fishing was met with resistance. The girls complained about getting hurt last time, claiming such hard labor was beyond them. Suddenly, one student bitterly blamed Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen for their selfishness, arguing that they, being longtime classmates, should have looked out for everyone. This sparked a wave of vitriol against Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin, accusing them of betrayal and selfishness. "I even treated Lu Karen to milk tea 2 years ago. Such ingratitude. Yang's family is a distant relative of mine. How can she be so selfish? I'm technically her cousin." The students found common enemies in Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin, excitedly disparaging them as if they were owed millions. Liang Yu was dumbfounded by their slander and couldn't accept such distortion of facts. Witnessing this, she felt no different from street thugs, her disappointment turning to resolve. She demanded silence and announced, "I plan to move into Zhang Yi's shelter with Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen." She knew it was time for them to learn independence. Only by fending for themselves could they truly grow. A student excitedly grabbed Liang Yu's hand. "Teacher Liang, did Zhang Yi agree to let us move into his shelter? That's fantastic." Liang Yu shook off her hand. "What kind of logic is that? I said only I would be moving into the shelter, and you all need to continue staying here, learning to live by your own abilities." Liang Yu stepped back. "However, I will still deliver food for 10 people every day, and you'll need to find a way to make up for the shortfall on your own. I won't indulge you any longer." The students, facing their stern teacher, couldn't believe their ears. Some girls even burst into tears. "Teacher, you've changed. How could you abandon us?" The boys were angry. "How can you be so selfish? Only thinking of your own comfort, leaving us to suffer here." Hearing her students' complaints from all sides, Liang Yu's heart turned cold. She pushed the door open forcefully. "Enough. I've made my decision. You'll have to fend for yourselves." Having given up on her students, Liang Yu returned to the shelter again. Shokir, Keir, naturally hospitable, welcomed her but remained curious. Seeing Liang Yu hesitate to speak, Zhou Keir didn't press further, simply smiling. I'll call Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen to keep you company. It'll be good for you to have a heart-to-heart talk. Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin came to Liang Yu with joy. Since parting ways at Azure Sky Academy, it was their first time gathering for a chat. Liang Yu first inquired about their recent life, and Lu Karen happily shared, we're living comfortably here. Zhang Yi brother treats us really well, sparing us from hard labor. He even prepared a workshop for me. To be honest, I feel happier now than when I was in school. Liang Yu thought to herself, that's because you're a mechanical genius, silly girl. Yang Xinxin gently added, we've indeed been living peacefully here. Have you made up your mind? Why not move in with us? Seeing Liang Yu's embarrassment, Yang Xinxin confidently said, you've been more than good to those students. You don't need to feel burdened. What you're doing is right. Yang Xinxin's affirmation seemed to heal Liang Yu's guilt, making her eyes well up with tears. This further solidified her determination to move in. Lu Karen served her a cup of hot coffee, and Liang Yu finally opened up. Then, when Zhang Yi returns, please help me talk to him about this. Lu Karen cheerfully said, Teacher Liang's martial arts skills are so impressive. Brother Zhang Yi would be eager to have her. Through her time with Zhang Yi, Lu Karen understood his way of dealing with useful talents. He treated them generously. Initially just Yang Xinxin's sidekick, she herself was a prime example. Yet, after proving her worth, Zhang Yi treated her like a sister. Yang Xinxin laughed awkwardly. Lu Karen, you're still too naive. While you're not wrong, Brother Zhang Yi also dislikes taking on too much and hates others making decisions for him. He's a man of principle. For everyone who joins the shelter, he has very strict requirements. If you want to join us, you'd better be prepared. The most important thing is to obey his commands completely. Yang Xinxin deliberately played the bad cop to manage Liang Yu's expectations, making it easier for Zhang Yi to discuss with her personally upon his return. Liang Yu, instantly embarrassed, asked, what kind of demands does he usually have? Subconsciously crossing her legs, her face flushed with bashful thoughts. It was apparent to anyone the nature of his relationships with Zhou Keir and Yang Mi, considering all women in the shelter were notably attractive. Blushing, Liang Yu sipped her coffee, not daring to speculate further. Yang Xinxin rolled her eyes. What are you thinking, Teacher Liang? Brother Zhang Yi isn't like that. He's never behaved inappropriately with us. He's a man of great integrity. A man of integrity? Liang Yu was speechless at this description of Zhang Yi, finding it absurd to associate him with such a term. Yet, Yang Xinxin believed it without doubt, asserting, don't worry about that aspect. He's not driven by base desires. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrived in this post-apocalyptic world. He values your strength to help our team survive these harsh conditions. The main condition for joining the shelter, I guess, is your unconditional obedience during combat. Liang Yu nodded, confident in her ability to meet this requirement. Aware of her worth as a powerful mutant and a renowned martial arts master, she knew she was an excellent choice for Zhang Yi's personal martial arts tutor. Soon after, the sound of an engine approached. Yang Xinxin looked out the window. Brother Zhang Yi is back. Liang Yu clenched her fists, feeling nervous and tense. Yang Xinxin wheeled towards the door. It was the first time Zhang Yi saw Yang Xinxin coming to greet him. She usually busied herself with her computer, signaling something might have happened. What's up? Yang Xinxin, casting a glance at Liang Yu sitting on the sofa. Yang Xinxin whispered, Teacher Liang came over today. She's decided to join us. Noticing Liang Yu's nervousness, Zhang Yi thought, I spent so long convincing her the other day, and she remained unmoved. Has she finally decided to leave those dependents behind? Yang Xinxin smirked. My persuasion worked, along with your fasting tactic. Teacher Liang had some conflicts with her students, and in a huff, she came over. Zhang Yi chuckled playfully. He had anticipated these developments, though the swift turn of events surprised him. He deliberately limited their food supply to keep them in a perpetual state of hunger but not starvation. Liang Yu, a responsible teacher but no saint, was bound to reach her limit with her unreasonable students. Yang Xinxin mischievously added, I've already laid the groundwork for you. You could make some rather demanding requests. She winked at Zhang Yi. I'll help convince her too. Zhang Yi, grinning, pinched her cheek affectionately. You're such a sweetheart. He then asked Chun Lei and Uncle Yu to step next door, intending to speak with Liang Yu privately. Smoothly masking his amusement, he pushed Yang Xinxin into the living room, pretending to be casual. Lu Karen, too, was delighted at the bar. As a student, she was eager for her teacher to join them, hoping to survive the apocalypse together. Liang Yu, hesitating on the sofa, found relief when Yang Xinxin broke the silence. Brother Zhang Yi, I have a favor to ask. Pretending to be surprised, Zhang Yi turned to her. Just say it. You're not an outsider. Yang Xinxin got straight to the point. Can Teacher Liang move in with us? Liang Yu felt a weight lifted as her student voiced her own desire. Grateful to Yang Xinxin, she glanced at Zhang Yi, worried he might refuse. But Zhang Yi played along. Stop it. Doesn't Teacher Liang have students to care for? Then, shifting his tone, of course, Teacher Liang, with her beauty, swift swordplay, and formidable combat skills, would be warmly welcome to join our shelter. I just don't like to impose. Liang Yu was momentarily embarrassed, recalling that Zhang Yi had indeed expressed his wish to invite her not long ago, but she had declined to stay with her students. However, Zhang Yi's acknowledgement acknowledgement of her abilities provided her with some comfort. Yet, Liang Yu couldn't help but fear he might make some unreasonable demands. Lu Karen, bringing over hot tea, sympathized. Brother Zhang Yi, our teacher Liang has been too hard on herself. Even now, my classmates are lazy, exploiting her kindness. Without her generosity, they'd have been left to fend for themselves. Overwhelmed, she addressed Zhang Yi. I wish to join your team and move into your shelter. It's time those students learned independence. You were right. Even children wean eventually, let alone adults. By always being there, I might actually harm them. Rest assured, if I join the shelter, I will adhere strictly to your rules and be at your disposal. Seeing Liang Yu's candidness, Zhang Yi dropped his guard. Mutants were precious in this post-apocalyptic world, and he didn't want to risk worsening their relationship. Zhang Yi tentatively asked, I welcome your joining, but you must show sufficient sincerity. How do I know you'll follow my orders as you say? Liang Yu tensed. I have my limits, but I can agree to most reasonable requests. Zhang Yi calmly noted, your kindness and straightforwardness can be both strengths and weaknesses. Your value to me lies in your combat skills, not just teaching me martial arts, but using your strength in battle. He then probed, if one day, to protect us, I ordered you to kill someone you deemed innocent, could you do it? Liang Yu firmly replied, if it's to protect those close to me, I can do it, but if it's for someone's personal gain, that would be difficult. Her tone softened. From what I've observed, Mr. Zhang Yi, you seem to be a peace-loving person. As long as you're not provoked, you wouldn't harm the innocent, right? Yang Xinxin gave her a thumbs up, indicating her approval. Zhang Yi clarified, so, you mean as long as it ensures our safety, you're willing to kill anyone? Liang Yu carefully considered, yes, but I wouldn't harm our own. Her biggest fear was being ordered to kill her students. Zhang Yi reassured her with a smile. What do you take me for? Of course, I wouldn't harm those close to us. If it came to that, Zhang Yi would take matters into his own hands. As Zhang Yi sipped his coffee, he reflected on the invaluable nature of formidable combat prowess in the post-apocalyptic world. While Liang Yu might have seemed naive in certain aspects, being too shrewd could make her harder to manage. Bringing her into the fold seemed like a no-brainer, especially considering those insignificant students could be dealt with later. For now, it was just a matter of using a bit of his surplus food. Mulling over this, Zhang Yi set down his tea and warmly extended his hand. Welcome to the Zhang Yi family. I look forward to our cooperation. After Liang Yu joined the shelter, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Zhang Yi's continued promise to provide food for the Su family town students eased Liang Yu's residual guilt. Yang Xinxin, noticing Zhang Yi's expression, understood the countdown had begun for those students. Zhang Yi wasn't one to harbor freeloaders, and Yang Xinxin, sharing his disdain for them, fully supported his decisions. Zhou Kir suggested, let's throw a welcome party today to celebrate Liang Yu joining us. The group divided tasks, Zhou Kir to tidy up, Yang Mi and Zhou Haimei to prepare dinner. Liang Yu was overwhelmed by their warmth, yet couldn't shake the feeling of underlying hostility from their seemingly friendly gestures. After Zhou Kir and Yang Mi left, they exchanged knowing looks, sighing, another competitor, and such a capable fighter at that. And she's not bad looking either. Zhang Yi then invited, we're about to have a meeting, you should join us. Curious, Liang Yu inquired, what meeting is so urgent? Zhang Yi cryptically replied, a strategy meeting. Liang Yu, surprised, covered her mouth. Wasn't West Mountain Base wiped out? Are there still enemies nearby? Zhang Yi explained, power vacuums invite new challengers. The disappearance of West Mountain Base has others vying to fill the gap. We've already encountered other factions there today. The future is uncertain, but by preparing for the worst, we can confidently face any danger. Taking the situation seriously, Liang Yu assured, I'm ready to help however I can. Zhang Yi promised, I won't hesitate to ask. Suddenly, Yang Xinxin wheeled into the living room. Brother Zhang Yi, I've just uncovered valuable intelligence on other forces in Heavenly Sea City. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi quickly stood up. Call Uncle Yu and Chun Lei over too. Let's all listen together. Once everyone was gathered, Zhang Yi briefly recounted the day's events at West Mountain Base, highlighting the encounter with two groups, one of which they had clashed with. This clash could potentially provoke retaliation, suggesting imminent conflict over territory. We must always be vigilant, Zhang Yi emphasized. Turning to Yang Xinxin, let's have Yang Xinxin introduce us to the situation regarding the other forces, to get a better understanding. Yang Xinxin started. According to the intelligence from West Mountain Base, there are 4 forces in Heavenly Sea City that could pose a threat. 3 of them, like West Mountain Base, are situated within shelters. First, there's Radiant Prosperity Base in the east, controlling the city's largest oil refinery, making energy their biggest advantage. The current leader, Xiao Honglian, is a mutant with undisclosed fire-related abilities. Her deputy, Zhuge Qingting, is known for wind-related powers, and together, they're deadly. Then there's Morning Dew Base near the East Sea, virtually controlling all of Heavenly Sea City shipping vessels. It's said they can still venture out to sea despite the current conditions. Zhang Yi interjected, puzzled about the feasibility of maritime activities given the extreme cold, which should have frozen the sea. Yang Xinxin, with a smirk, addressed the collective confusion. I'll enlighten you. While nearshore areas freeze, deep-sea regions remain unfrozen, especially closer to the equator where temperatures are higher. Ocean currents circulate warm water from around the equator, plus Plus, undersea volcanoes contribute heat, making it impossible for the entire ocean to freeze solid. Even if surface temperatures plummet further, currents beneath the ice would persist. Sea salt also lowers the freezing point. Moreover, they have icebreakers, so anchoring in deep waters avoids entrapment by ice. Understanding dawned on the group, but Zhang Yi pondered the implications of such capabilities. Does that mean they can fish in the open sea or relocate to warmer regions near the equator? Yang Xinxin confirmed, yes, equatorial regions, being warmer, could sustain human life. Further examining the intelligence, she noted Morning Dew Base's ample resources due to sea-based activities. However, sea expeditions consume vast amounts of energy, necessitating close ties with the oil-rich Radiant Prosperity Base. Zhang Yi, intrigued, leaned over Yang Xinxin's shoulder and spotted a familiar symbol he'd seen on the group from West Mountain Base they had encountered. This revelation linked the men they had killed to Morning Dew Base. Yang Xinxin continued browsing. The leader of the Morning Dew Base is named Wei Dinghai. There is scant information about him, as well as his deputy, Qin Jingguan. It's even uncertain whether they are mutants. Their current focus is primarily at sea, and their main source of food is also from the ocean, so there are little conflicts with other bases. Seeing this, Zhang Yi thought to himself, now there is a conflict with me. The last of the 4 shelters is located in the Emerald Waterside district, near the Steel Group. The Emerald Waterside base was eventually controlled by the workers' organization of the Steel Group. Their current leader is named Xing Tian. Yang Xinxin continued, there are some records about this Xing Tian. His ability seems to be able to strengthen the people around him, but the specifics are not well documented. Yang Xinxin spread her hands in resignation. With the sudden onset of the apocalypse, the major shelters have each become kings of their own hills. According to the laws of the Dark Forest, they won't easily reveal their true strength. Maintaining enough mystery can have a sufficient deterrent effect. After all, the abilities of mutants are very complex, and without knowing the true strength of an opponent, no one dares to make a move rashly. All 4 bases were seized through force, but aside from the West Mountain Base, the other 3 don't have formal armies, essentially a rabble of armed individuals. Therefore, in terms of combat training, they are somewhat inferior to the West Mountain Base. However, their leaders are all mutants. Zhang Yi pondered and said, this makes sense. After all, in the post-apocalyptic world, where order has collapsed, only the strong can truly rule. However, Chen Xinyan is an exception. His rise to leadership is entirely due to his loyal right-hand man, Ling Feng. Now it seems that each of the 4 bases has its own advantages. The West Mountain Base controls a formal army. The Radiant Prosperity Base has a large amount of oil and gas resources. The Morning Dew Base controls maritime vessels, and the Emerald Waterside Base controls the steel factories. Realizing this, Zhang Yi felt much more at ease, as it meant the West Mountain Base was the strongest in terms of combat, given its arsenal and elite troops. Chunlei also relaxed a lot upon hearing this, covering his chest and breathing a sigh of relief. We've taken down the strongest. The other 3 are nothing to fear for us. Zhang Yi smiled and said, exactly. Although they possess some armed forces, the members are mostly workers from steel and oil refineries or port workers, definitely unable to compare with trained soldiers. The biggest mystery now is the mutants. Due to our lack of intelligence, we have no idea how many mutants there are, so it's difficult to judge their strength. In that case, it's best to avoid conflicts as much as possible and hope for peaceful coexistence. Of course, we don't seek trouble, but we're not afraid of it either. If they push us too hard, we don't need to fear them. Suddenly, Liang Yu spoke up. Didn't you say there were 4 forces? You've only mentioned 3 so far. Hearing this, Chun Lei's face suddenly turned pale. The last one isn't the strongest, is it? Yang Xinxin calmly said, it's not that the last organization is particularly strong, it just feels special. She continued to present the information. The last organization is called the Snow Worship Sect, a religious organization established after the apocalypse. Their leader is named Yuan Konya. According to the intelligence we have, her mutant ability is named Blessing. She can help other mutants awaken their abilities without any cost. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi's mind buzzed, immediately thinking of Li Jian from the Yuelu district. Uncle Yu instantly became serious, having personally encountered followers of the Snow Worship Sect. Considering the few mutants in the room gained their abilities through near-death experiences, the fact that Yuan Konya could directly awaken others' abilities was chilling, highlighting the terrifying strength of the Snow Worship Sect. Moreover, its existence as a religious entity meant it could attract more mutants, suggesting limitless expansion potential. The gravity of the situation dawned on everyone, their expressions turning grave. Yang Xinxin continued, Snow Worship Sect was originally a minor religion in Heavenly Sea City known as the Theology of Reason. After renaming to Snow Worship Sect, the leader, Yuan Konya, proclaimed herself as the earthly embodiment of the snow god. She claims the snowstorm is a cleansing by the snow god, sparing only those devout to the sect. Their influence is concentrated in the Celestial Tribute and Eternal Mist areas, marked as the highest threat level by West Mountain Base. Zhang Yi, with hands propped under his chin, spoke seriously. Celestial Tribute and Eternal Mist are densely populated, making Snow Worship Sect's rapid growth growth plausible. In times of disaster, people seek spiritual solace. But how have they survived till now? Those areas are resource scarce, heavily populated, and they lacked pre-stored supplies or shelters like other bases. What sustains them? Are they consuming meat? The room fell silent as everyone contemplated, wanting to voice their thoughts. Zhang Yi turned to Uncle Yu. You're the oldest among us. You go first. Uncle Yu said, no matter what force we're dealing with, I believe our top priority should be to establish our defenses. We've acquired so many weapons from West Mountain Base. It's time to put them to use. Zhang Yi nodded. It seems that building defense lines is a pressing matter. I killed a few people from the Morning Dew base at the West Mountain Base, and there was also a mutant. If they find out the truth, we will definitely not escape their revenge. At this time, the timid Chun Lei was so scared that his face turned pale. It seems that the situation is very bad. Chun Lei is a typical pessimist. As soon as he opens his mouth, it is full of negative energy. The news of the destruction of the West Mountain Base has spread. All major forces are eyeing this piece of cake like tigers. They are likely to fight for this fat meat. We are so close to the West Mountain Base. I'm afraid it will be very easy to involve us. Zhang Yi looked at him and said, so what's your brilliant idea, fatty? Chun Lei had a pondering look. When his fat face makes this expression, it always gives people a sense of pretentiousness. I think it's best to fortify our defenses. Don't leave casually. Zhang Yi nodded. This fat man, to say the least, his ability to stay alive out of fear is also unique, basically thinking the same as him. At this time, Liu Karen interjected, even if we hide in the shelter and don't provoke them, there's no guarantee that they will not come to attack us. Zhang Yi said, so we have to quickly build a good line of defense to cope with all changes with constancy. After all, we can't control what others want to do, right? At this time, Liu Karen still looked pensive, as if he had something to say but stopped. Zhang Yi saw this and laughed. Everyone can speak freely. Anyway, it's a discussion now. Maybe your ideas can open everyone's minds. After receiving Zhang Yi's encouragement, only then did Liu Karen feel relieved to say, I think we still need to go out for a trip. Half of the outer wall of the shelter was destroyed by Ling Feng and the others before. I think we still need to get some materials to reinforce it. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin and said, this matter is indeed very important. The materials from the West Mountain Base can only be used to build the outer defense line. The shelter's defense has been greatly reduced after the bombing. Although going out has certain risks, at least we haven't had a direct conflict with the four major forces yet, so we must not delay. We have to take time to go out in the next 2 days. After all, the other party is not familiar with our side yet. They don't dare to act rashly either. At this time, Liang Yu's words were already on the tip of her tongue. Suddenly, it was preempted by Yang Xinqin. Liang Yu had to swallow her words back. Everyone pays attention to Yang Xinqin's speech because this girl has a high IQ. Many opinions are very forward-looking. Yang Xinqin said calmly, I think everyone doesn't need to be too nervous, let alone be in a fluster because of this. Take the West Mountain Base as an example. Even if they originally had strong armed forces, but they could not control the entire West Mountain area, it is probably not so easy for other forces to reach us. And the four major forces are also checking and balancing each other. They will definitely also produce a sense of vigilance. The West Mountain Base was destroyed overnight. There should be no big moves in the short term, so I judge. First, our time is still very abundant. As for the defense line, we should also start building it. After all, preparedness averts peril. At the same time, we should also take this time, collect some useful materials back. At this time, Yang Xinqin gave Zhang Yi a wink. Brother Zhang Yi, it must be very difficult to collect materials for repairing the shelter, right? Zhang Yi's mind turned a little and guessed Yang Xinqin's intention. He nodded and said, those are all rare materials. It will definitely take a lot of time to find them. Yang Xinqin looked at the nervous Liang Yu. Teacher Liang, you should also tell them to stock up on food in Su Family Town. At this moment, Liang Yu couldn't help blurting out, that's what I'm worried about. If there are really enemies attacking, wouldn't Su Family Town on the other side of the river be very dangerous? Yang Xinqin looked at Liang Yu with her head tilted and said, do you want to protect them for the rest of your life? I just told you to tell them to prepare supplies in advance, and then hide as much as possible. You don't have to worry too much. I just said, this area should be safe in the short term. At this time, Zhang Yi had already confirmed Yang Xinqin's idea. It turned out that this was to prepare to borrow a knife to kill someone. She deliberately described the situation as not so tense, to avoid Liang Yu asking Zhang Yi to bring those students to Lark Manor for protection. Secondly, if there are really enemies attacking, the first to be solved must be Su Family Town, the outpost of Lark Manor. This move of borrowing a knife to kill is really amazing. After listening to Yang Xinqin's explanation, Liang Yu was deep in thought. She was also very clear. Su Family Town is completely an outpost of Lark Manor. From a geographical point of view, to attack Lark Manor, it is necessary to solve Su Family Town first. Thinking of this, Liang Yu thought of a proposal. Can my students come to help build the defense line in exchange for food and protection? Zhang Yi did not directly answer Liang Yu's question, but asked back with some sarcasm. I don't know if your students have learned to fish. If they don't learn in this weather, someone might really die. Liang Yu felt very embarrassed. She also heard the hidden meaning in Zhang Yi's words. How can they expect those good-for-nothings who can't even learn to fish on the icy river to be of any help. At this time, Yang Xinxin comforted Liang Yu. Don't worry, Teacher Liang, I just said, it is unlikely that the enemy will appear in the short term, and those are all my guesses. Maybe nothing will happen. Just then, Zhang Yi suddenly said the opposite of his usual, since Teacher Liang is still so worried. Then I will try to help you. He was heard smiling at Liang Yu. If there is really any danger here, I can arrange for your students to move to other villas in Lark Manor. There are still many intact villas around the shelter. It's not a problem to accommodate those students. Everyone looked at Zhang Yi with their mouths agape. No one believed that these words came out of Zhang Yi's mouth, especially Liang Yu. After all, in her impression, Zhang Yi is not a big philanthropist who does good deeds. At this time, only Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi calmly, with eyes full of admiration. Looking at everyone's shocked eyes, Zhang Yi said with a smile, "Don't look at me with those eyes. Am I really that ruthless in your eyes?" Liang Yu's face was a little embarrassed, thinking silently in her heart, "Aren't you?" Zhang Yi shook his head. Those were things of the past. After all, we were comrades in arms at that time, but now it's completely different. You, Liang Yu, are now my companion, equivalent to my family. So as long as it's someone you want to protect, I will definitely help you protect them. At this moment, Zhang Yi's eyes were incredibly sincere. Liang Yu was instantly moved to tears, causing ripples in the heart of this 27-year-old single female teacher. Originally, she had been holding a grudge for taking her dragon's roar long sword. Now she seems to have completely let it go. I really don't know how to thank you, Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi shook his head with a smile. Don't be so distant. In the future, we will all be in the same boat. Your matters are my matters. You just need to do your duty to protect everyone's safety. The subtext is that as long as you obediently listen to me and slash whoever I tell you to slash, that's enough. Liang Yu nodded with determination in her eyes. At this moment, Zhang Yi's image in her heart became extraordinarily tall. She even felt a little self-blame for having such deep prejudices against Zhang Yi before. At this time, Zhang Yi suddenly stood up and said, "Time is of the essence. I will arrange the work now. I plan to use Lark Manor as the center. At the same time, I will go out with Liu Karen to find repair materials and build a solid line of defense. Before I come back, no one is allowed to leave the shelter to avoid unnecessary trouble." After the meeting, the few women prepared a table full of delicacies in order to welcome Liang Yu to join their team. After seeing these delicacies, Liang Yu's eyes almost popped out. Before even picking up her chopsticks, saliva had already flowed onto the table. She completely disregarded her image and ate and drank frantically to the point that she was stuffed. Her stomach and intestines were immediately troubled. She was seen holding her stomach with a painful expression. Shouker saw the problem at a glance. It should be that she ate too poorly before, and now suddenly having meat and fish, her stomach and intestines can't stand it. Shouker quickly helped Liang Yu to lie down in the room and also brought her some stomach medicine. Lying alone on the bed, this warm feeling made her so moved that she almost cried. She couldn't help telling herself in her heart, "This time, I really made the right choice."